soccer with cars.
5-on-5 team chess.
Your cars that you control have rockets on them.
But it's closest to sort of like capture the flag.
These aren't things that could even exist in real life. That's why it's kind of hard to explain.
We're talking about video games.
They're just sitting around playing video games.
I mean, it's, magic and swords and stuff, right? But
it is more complex than that.
Competitive video games.
Video games, a lot of people don't really think of them as competitive.
It does entail a lot more teamwork and collaboration than people initially think.
Team-based competitive video games with a shot at a TAPS championship.
Video games that are competitive, typically team-based, highly structured as far as the rules of the game go, and heavily strategic.
We talk with players and coaches at 3 TAPS schools with active esports teams.
The British International School of Houston.
The Village School in Houston, Texas.
We're Lubbock Christian School, obviously in Lubbock, Texas.
You're going to hear about how they got started.
But they came to me before Christmas asking to play in a public school tournament here in town.
And I said, I don't necessarily believe you.
You're going to hear about the games themselves.
Rock League basically is car soccer.
There's a lot of physics involved, but basically at the end of the day, Rocket League is you put the ball in your opponent's net, whoever has more goals wins.
League of Legends, which is arguably the most popular esport in the world.
Your goal is to destroy their base before they destroy yours.
And you have different characters that play different roles, much like a rook is different from a bishop, is different from a pawn, is different from a queen, what have you. But that is the simplest elevator pitch of what League of Legends is.
You're going to hear from coaches who are already comfortable with video games.
I'm someone who's just really passionate about esports and gaming in general, kind of a lifelong gamer, I guess you could say.
And from coaches who are completely new to this.
I help coach our cross-country team also, and that's much more in my wheelhouse. I can coach them to be better runners. Coaching these kids to be better League of Legends players is way outside my wheelhouse.
You're going to hear advice.
The biggest thing for this to be successful is it really does need to be student-driven.
And you're going to hear how it's benefited their students and their school.
In July of 1992, my family and I were making the move from Florida to Dallas, Texas, as I had accepted the opportunity to become the varsity boys head basketball coach at Addison Trinity Christian. I had no idea what TAPS was and that the private and public schools in Texas played in separate governing organizations. But I quickly learned that was the way of Texas. Now, 48 years later, I have witnessed the steady growth of the TAPS organization from the trunk of Johnny Henderson's car to the Texas Motor Speedway office complex. Hello, my name is Earl Garland, and I have come out of retirement to work with a recently created partnership between Globe Life, Liberty National Division, Everett Agencies, and TAPS. This partnership allows Larry Thexton and I to form the team that will be servicing the TAPS membership with Globe Life benefits. Globe Life offers each employee of the member schools 2 introductory no-cost offers that will benefit you. As we embrace these challenging times and recognize our opportunities, please go to the person at your school who handles employee benefits and ask them to connect with Larry and I to hear more about the benefits Globe Life offers. My email is earl.globelife@gmail.com, and Larry's email is larry.globelife@gmail.com. Make sure to tell them that you would like to receive the 2 introductory no-cost offers that we can offer to each full-time employee when we work with your school. Larry and I have served on the TAPS Athletic Executive Committee in the past and are super excited to serve you and this great organization. Have a great year, and as always, competition with honor.
Good morning. My name is John Skees, and I'm the Director of Media for TAPS. We've got a lot to cover today, but first I want to thank you all for joining us, and I want to cover some webinar basics before we get started. This webinar is being recorded. If you're registered for the webinar, you will receive an email later this afternoon with a link to that recording. We're also going to publish it on our website and our YouTube page. That's youtube.com/tapsbiz. For those of you listening on TAPS Radio, you will be able to view the recording on YouTube after the webinar. If you have questions as we go, please use the questions feature in the GoToWebinar interface. We're going to try to answer those as we go, but if we don't get to yours right away, there is a brief Q&A session at the end. But if we still don't get to your question, or if it's just too specific for us to answer appropriately in today's presentation, please send us an email afterwards at info@taps.biz or call us at the office. Finally, if you're having any trouble with the webinar, you can use the questions feature to get my attention, and I will try to help you as best I can. But for now, we are joined by Brian Bunselmeyer, the TAPS Executive Director, Steve Prudhomme, TAPS Associate Director, Robert Huckabee, TAPS Associate Director and Director of Compliance, Vina Williams, TAPS Director of Fine Arts, and Will Dixon, who's in charge of our live broadcasts, and he's helping us behind the keyboard today in the office. Before I hand things over to Brian, we've got a couple of poll questions for those of you joining us. We would like to know if any of these areas represents your school. Are you in the Austin metro area, Dallas-Fort Worth metro area, Houston, San Antonio, or none of the above? Going to leave that open for a few seconds. All right, I'm going to close this poll, and we would also like to know what best describes your role at a TAPS school. Are you an administrator, an athletic or fine art director, a coach, or are you another staff, a faculty, or are you not affiliated with a TAPS school? All right, folks, thank you for participating. I'm going to close this poll and hand it over to Brian.
Good morning, and thank you for joining us here this morning. I think we have information most have been looking for. We've been gathering and then regathering and trying again time and time with each day and almost with each passing hour as new information becomes available. Embracing our challenges and recognizing our opportunities. That was the theme of our convention that was postponed till next year, but I think those comments still apply to this coming year. We're going to embrace the challenges that are presented towards us, and we're also going to recognize our opportunities. For every time one door closes, another will open. We're going to have to start looking for those opportunities as we go forward as an organization. I know you're doing that as a school right now. So thank you for joining us here today. Greatly appreciate the interest, and we'll try to give you as much help as we can. Encourage you to use the questions bar on the side for the GoToWebinar, but if you are unable to do that, please feel free to email us at info@taps.biz. Kelly will make sure we get the information up so that we can answer those questions. So I'm going to turn it over to Robert for a quick disclaimer, and away we'll go.
All right, thank you, Brian. Good morning to everyone. If you've been with our webinars throughout the spring and the summer, you've seen this slide many times. Just a reminder, we're going to give you some direction today on changes that have been made with regard to our calendar and student eligibility. As Brian said, we've looked at a lot of information. We've had a lot of plans, still a lot of plans in the works. But keep in mind as we walk through our discussion today that anything that we say here is always subject to your national, state, and local orders and regulations that exist for you in your particular location. Part of what we've done in coming to the conclusions as we've sat with our executive board over the course of the summer is we've surveyed our schools a couple of times during this month and asked for information. We wanted your input. We've obviously had a lot of discussions with people who called over the summer with regard to our plans and what direction we were looking. So I'm going to pass it over to Steve to share some of the results of those surveys with you and give you an idea of some of the information we used as we walk through this process.
We appreciate the high number of participation that we got with our surveys. And again, a lot of information is obsolete, not within a week or a day, but an hour. But starting off with the school date, when we polled people, a vast majority of folks were planning to start in August at the usual dates, as you see. Obviously, county orders and some of the other things that have happened have changed those in the last couple of days. But that's the school date start, and the school end start is very important. We continue as we poll the the membership to look at when you're going to have your last day of school, graduation, and very few were planning to go into June. Most of them were staying with the traditional dates in May, and that also goes into what our consideration as we do our calendar, and that's been a consistent theme throughout. Desired day, first day of competition. Again, these things have changed pretty radically here in the last couple of days, but most folks were planning to start, or 44% were planning to start at August 10th, which we had on the calendar. The 24% that had no preference, most of them were planning, from their comments, they were looking to start at a later date. And as you can see, the rest. So again, we know what we desire, what we were looking for, and our plan took that into account. The fall break stayed pretty consistent. Either you were having no break or you were having a 1 week break around Thanksgiving. Winter break, almost 80% of the folks were having the traditional 2 weeks. 20% or 18% were going with 3 weeks, but again, staying close to form. And spring break as well. The 1 week spring break seemed to be the plan that most schools had at the time that we surveyed. Also, most schools were very aggressive, not aggressive, I would say optimistic about participation. There was 15% that did not know about fall extracurricular participation. As you go into the winter, people were pretty sure they were going to participate, and in the spring as well, with that 10% not knowing. But overall, you see that our schools are looking to get back to work and get back to the extracurriculars. And this was an interesting one, and it was an interesting time that we asked you in the middle of the summer, but we said, do you plan to have visitors at school? And only 20% said yes during the school day, but 50% said yes for contests. So they were going to have visiting crowds coming in, and they were getting plans for that. And another issue that we looked at was how many multi-activity students did you have? So if they're doing just one activity, it's a little bit easier to set a calendar, but when they're doing multiple fine art and athletic events, and as you can see, we had to go all the way up to 40% to say there was 18%, 40 and below. And as you can see, up over 80 was a third of our students. So again, most of our students are doing multiple things, and that had to go into the planning that we're going to be doing now and in the future.
All right, thank you, Steve. Brian?
Just to add a few more comments, we just wanted to recognize all those that have contacted the TAPS office by phone or email or by mail with plans. We had plans all across the board, from don't do anything for this year to don't have any restrictions for this year. Anything in between was also there. We had flipping seasons. We had moving everything to the spring. We had let's compete next summer. We've reviewed multiple opportunities and multiple variations of those, but using the data that we had and that you just saw as Steve presented, I think it gave us a pretty good outlook that we want to come back. We, as an organization and our member schools, we want to come back, get back into the saddle as soon as possible and move forward.
Also, the comments that came along with the surveys, we really do appreciate the people that took the time to type out some pretty good comments that gave us a feeling as we moved around the state what people were feeling and what was happening. So again, we do appreciate the time you took on the survey.
All right, we're going to move into student eligibility. We're going to cover two major topics today. As you have questions, as we go through, if you'll try to send your questions to us when we're talking about a topic, we'll try to get to those when we're on that topic. If not, we'll try to get them at the end. So we're going to jump into student eligibility as we finish the spring. We've walked through the summer and now looking at beginning the fall. We know your educational models at your schools are changing drastically, and that does come into play with regard to eligibility in TAPS. So I'm going to pass it off to Brian to talk a little bit about how our eligibility rules are set up.
As we go through the eligibility rules, remember that in the TAPS Constitution, it does take a 2/3 membership vote before anything can be changed in the Constitution. The vast majority of our eligibility rules are entailed there. They're covered in the Constitution, so we didn't have a lot of leeway to make changes. However, the board does have changes that they can make to the bylaws. They can amend and create bylaws, and our board has done some excellent work over the last week or so. Board members have had great conversation with each other, working with the staff. I commend our board for the actions that they've taken. We'll walk through those here as we walk through this presentation. But remember, a lot of the basic eligibility rules cannot be changed. So as we move forward, understand some things our hands were tied with, and where we could make amendments, we did. So we'll move forward. Robert, tell us about the basic tenets of eligibility in TAPS.
Thank you, Brian. Our core tenets of eligibility are contained in Article 5 of our Constitution. Those are things that really cannot change. They haven't changed historically over the years. If you turn 19 before September 1, you're no longer eligible for high school competition. If you've already completed 4 years of high school, you're not eligible. If you're a high school graduate, full-time day student is actually addressed in the Constitution, but there are no details there. That's an area where the board did have some latitude to make some changes, and you'll hear about those in a few minutes. And then no pass, no play, that's always been a requirement. That's there. We're going to be making some tweaks to that and getting some new governance out, but no pass, no play will remain in effect. All these are in the Constitution, and there are core tenets of eligibility, so they can't go away, but in a couple of areas, the board was able to make some tweaks, and we'll share those with you in just a second. Steve, tell our viewers where they can go on our website and find this information.
We've changed the website a little bit, and to find the bylaws, you go to resources, you hover over there, and then you'll see a button for bylaws. You'll hit that, and that'll take you right to where it is. Also, when you come to taps.biz, there's a lot of good information. We send out emails, we do rank 1 pushes, but we also post them. And if you go to the athletic director and the fine art director corners, we have some really good areas there where you can find everything that has been sent, everything that's been posted. So again, go back to taps.biz, check and double check. The bylaws with student eligibility, and you can look down those. We are going to be touching on all aspects of student eligibility. Some of them won't change. Some of them we'll have to dive in a little bit more deeply. And again, you'll find those basically 77 through 104. The border schools, international students, there's no changes. Our boarding schools, we do see that they have a huge challenge coming up with what's going on currently, but our governance has not changed for them. We're there to support them. Student not living with parents, no change. Appeal process is in place and has been in place and can be utilized. No changes to high school graduates. They cannot have graduated then come back for another year. We had that question in the spring. And then our considerations for 2021 that are going on. I'll hand it over to Robert.
Okay, this is an area where we had a lot of questions over the course of the summer. The Constitution does say you have to be a full-time day student to be eligible in TAPS. Section 82 is a bylaw that over the years we've tried to put some details to that and define what that looks like. The way that's been defined historically is hugely impacted by what's been going on over the spring, and then how we know you're going to be doing education at the school level. So this is an area where the board looked long and hard at making some changes, looking toward helping you determine your students that would be eligible and giving some latitude in some areas. I'm going to pass this over to Brian to cover that a little bit with us, give us a little intro.
As we go through the webinar, the number one set of questions that we've had since really this began in March was student eligibility. So that's why we're starting with student eligibility. I know many of you are concerned about the calendar. Can't wait for us to bring the calendar up. It's kind of like you got to eat your green beans before you get your cake. The cake of the calendar is coming later. So we're going to walk through this student eligibility. So a full-time day student needs to have not changed. We're just going to add clarification. So 4 courses are required to meet the minimum. The course requirements, we've updated those a little bit. We'll get into those, but what does count and what does not count. There's been a concern over the years of athletic courses being able to gain athletic eligibility. In other words, can I use PE? Can I use weightlifting or whatever is one of my 4? We'll discuss that. Dual credit. Over the years, we've had dual credit on your campus, virtual dual credit, or we've had dual credit at the college. Those have always been required to be on your campus with the conditions that we're operating under today. The board has approved some changes for the coming year. And then PACES is a packet model. Some of you have used that, and some of you still utilize that, especially in credit recovery. So we're going to discuss that as well. So the overall for basic student eligibility, we hope this will answer most of the questions that we've had to date here in our office over the last 5 or 6 months. And we appreciate you following along with us. So Robert.
All right, Brian, I'm going to pick up with the course requirements. So you have to have 4 courses to be a full-time day student, and those courses have to meet the following requirements. It has to be a course you're giving credit toward your graduation at your school. It needs to be calculated in the student's overall GPA. It needs to be present on the student's transcript, and students are not to be concurrently enrolled or seeking graduation from another high school or a homeschool program. For example, you wouldn't want a student coming over to your school just taking the minimum number of courses to gain eligibility, but really be concurrently enrolled in a homeschool or other program and intending to graduate from that program. If you have any questions about any of those, you can always reach out to us. We'll help you walk through that. Next slide, what are the course definitions? What type of courses qualify for these 4 core courses that we're talking about? Well, the eligible courses would be all of your core courses, your 4x4, your math, science, English, and social studies, all of those. Your Bible, theology, and religion, those are all fine. All of your fine arts classes would be fine, and dual credit qualifies for that. We're going to talk a little bit more detail about dual credit in just a minute. If you have questions about that, hold those. We'll get to that in just a minute. Which courses do not qualify? Study hall, teacher's aid, courses for which no grade is given, and then athletics and PE, you cannot use that as one of your 4 core classes. I'm going to kick it to Steve and let him elaborate on that just a little bit.
Yeah, basically, you can't get to the 4th. It does count for whatever else, but it does not get you to the 4 that you need for athletic eligibility. So whether they're getting an athletic period, a physical education course, credit for being on the team, that does not count. So you need to be aware of that. Robert's going to go on to dual credit.
All right, dual credit. We're going to give you some details about dual credit. The way Section 82 has been written up until this point is dual credit. You pretty much had to be taking it on your campus to get credit and to count that as one of your 4 classes. We're going to give you some latitude there this year with the things that we know you're dealing with. Certainly, if you're still taking it on campus, that qualifies. Your grading period, just like all other grading, needs to be no longer than a 9-week period of time. Online for this year, for 2020, 2021, we are allowing online dual credit to count as one of those 4. Obviously, we would prefer that you monitor it at your school level, have a study hall or whatever, but we'll leave that to you, to how you manage at the school level. And then also in person, if you have students taking dual credit at another location or maybe at the university, that will count as well. So if you're in dual credit, either in person, online, virtual, that will count now. It doesn't have to be limited to on your campus. That will count now as one of those core classes. Next slide talks about PACES or other types of self-paced curriculum. That language actually exists in the Constitution, so we leave that there. We can't mess with that, but that is allowed. No changes are recommended here. Obviously, you need to follow grades in progress, just like you do all of your other classes. Full-time day students, we know you're going to have different educational models. Brian, visit with us about that a little bit.
Before we bounce off of that, I want to go back and remind you that the 4 classes are required for all competition. That's whether it be fine art or whether it be athletics. And it also includes all activities in which TAP sponsors. So that means non-district, district, tournament play, scrimmages, etc. You have to be a full-time day student to participate in those activities. So there's been a little question over the years as to where that goes. There's also the question of why do band and choir, etc. count, or why does a fine art count and an athletic not? Again, it's the athletic eligibility. Most schools gave credit for the first 2 years as the requirements of the state back in the public school days, and that's what's driven the rules that we have today. So those rules have been in place and they continue to be in place as we move forward. However, with the extension of the dual credit and online opportunities, we feel like that should not be too big a challenge as we move forward. So we're going to go on to the educational models. The new term buzzword is brick and mortar. Are they coming back to your school and sitting in your seats? Do you have an alternative curriculum for 2021? virtual or PACES or some other option along that line. Some are using a third-party sourcing for some of their classes that they may or may not be able to do. In my day, that would have been over the satellite. Now I'm sure that's over the internet. Becomes a little bit easier. And then some schools are going to do a combination of a brick and mortar. You may have some school students taking virtual classes while others are in class. You may do an A-B kind of day where some students are in the school brick and mortar on Monday while others are at home, and then you flip as you go forward. So as we go through full-time day students, as long as they are enrolled, attending, and matriculating through your school year, whether you are brick and mortar, alternative, or a combination thereof, they will be eligible for participation in all TAPS extracurricular activities, both fine arts and athletics. Then we're going to jump down and go to full-time day student. Is that correct, or did I get off?
Regular attendance.
Regular attendance as we bounce down. Regular attendance, students must be enrolled for the current school year, and transfer students must be approved before they get there. And then the big test question that we've had come up here, and it's the hypothetical. We don't want to get too far into those, but we'll throw this one. What if a student just doesn't start school until September 8th or September 15th or whatever date that they choose to come? Remember that as far as a transfer student, et cetera, those students, if they played anywhere else or they participated anywhere else the year before, would be considered a transfer student. If they're your students that were with you last year that are simply coming in on a delayed start, nothing would happen. Transfer students may decide they don't like your classroom, or their parents may not feel comfortable coming back yet. If they started another school or a homeschool program in between last year and this year, as they come back, they would be considered a transfer student, and those rules will have to be applied. Rather than dive really deep here, as you have individual student cases or concerns come up, please reach out, info@taps.biz, or the TAPS office, 254-947-9268. There's another question that we have concerned ourselves here, and I know that's out there as well. What about these students that transition between brick and mortar? I know most schools that have a virtual setting and a brick and mortar setting are going to go on 6 or 9 week blocks. They're going to want to make sure that the students, whatever they sign up for, they stay. Moving between a virtual composition of your school and a brick and mortar composition of your school, that's not a transfer student. They are considered contiguous enrollment, and you will be fine and ready to rock and roll. So again, if you are online and you are using the online at a junior college, or using another online source, a grade is being collected, et cetera, that would count as one of your 4 for this year. They do not have to be taking all 4 on your campus if it is a virtual course. And again, reminding that if it goes towards your GPA, meaning it goes towards your cumulative GPA, then it needs to be counted. Pass fail. Obviously, there are a couple of courses that would be pass fail. I know many schools went to a pass fail option in the spring. If you're going to go to that pass fail option, please reach back out to us, info@taps.biz, so we can have a more direct conference with you to make sure which courses those are. And if you're going totally pass fail, that would be a conversation we'd like to have as well. Can't necessarily say what the answer would be on each of those, but for the most part, if it's one course, it's pass fail, I think you'd be all right. And remember, with your dual credit courses, you do have to check those grades every 9 weeks. So as we go through for eligibility purposes. So hopefully that answers a few of the questions. Robert, do we have any more we need to jump into right now, or are we ready to move forward?
No, I think we're ready to move ahead. We'll catch some at the end if we need to. Another topic is 4 years of high school. No changes coming for this year. This is in Article 5 of the Constitution. Eligibility for high school, your 4 years of eligibility begins when you first enter the 9th grade. Whether you participated or not, or whether you had an interruption during high school, doesn't matter. This is an area where we get a lot of requests. We get a lot of calls from parents on this one. Their student repeated a grade for some reason, or something happened, and they're out of 4 years of eligibility, and they're wondering, is there an appeal or an exception for that? There actually is not, because that's contained in the Constitution. Even our executive board doesn't have the ability to grant that relief.
To that point, Robert, as the spring unfolded and into the early summer, I think there were students that were, and parents that were dissatisfied with the progress their child had made. And they were asking if, in light of the COVID situation, COVID-19, would we be entertaining appeals on that basis. The board's met several times, and again, it is a constitutional issue. So both the 19 before September 1 and an additional year of high school participation are not allowed. If you get into that situation, I highly encourage you to check with your registrar now to see if anybody falls into that situation. And it's always better to know ahead of time than late.
All right, Steve, let's talk about students not yet in high school.
Yeah, I get all the no answers I get to give, but there are no changes. No 8th graders will be allowed to participate in high school athletics. This includes the individual sports, whether it's cross country or tennis or a team sport. There are specific cases in fine arts and activities where they can, and those are outlined in the TAPS manual. Please contact the TAPS office if you have a question. We like to give permission. We like to give guidance. We don't want to deal with something on the other end. So be sure, students not yet in high school, again, those rules have not changed. And one other thing, I saw a question about if an 8th grader is moving to 9th grade, is that a transfer student? The answer to that is no, they are not. But if it is a 9th grader who comes on your campus and then leaves to go to practice somewhere else and comes back, then that would make them a transfer, but that's a deeper question.
All right, thanks, Steve. Let's jump to no pass, no play. We've got section 77 out beside there. There currently is no section 77. If you go look at the bylaws, we're going to be creating that in the next few days. This is a discussion we've had with our executive board. No pass, no play is contained in the Constitution in Article 5. If you actually went and read that, it wouldn't make much sense to you because it was written about 30 or 40 years ago when grading was done differently and grade checks were done practically on a weekly basis. What we will institute in section 77 will be almost identical to what we've implemented and we've advised people over the years. You have to have a no pass, no play policy at your school. We support that. What we've historically said is you have to do those grade checks no later than every 9 weeks. And if you're ineligible, TAPS has always allowed you to fail at least one class. You might have different or more strict guidelines at your school, and many of our schools do. We say you're ineligible for a minimum of 2 weeks. Some of you have different guidelines. We support your guidelines if they're more strict than what we have in place. But we're going to have some new governance coming your way. When that comes out, we'll advise you of that. It won't be drastically different. It's just an opportunity for us to codify this now in a way that's easy access for our schools to see.
Jump on one question here that came up with the dual credit, Robert. So if your normal grade checks are every 6 weeks, then you would be checking with dual credit or any online course, just the same situation, right? If you're at 6 weeks, you stay at 6 weeks, but you can go no longer than 9.
Yes, that's true. You would treat those courses the same as you do all your other courses with regard to your grading period and your eligibility. One more thing on no pass, no play that we'll be clarifying is what's going to happen if a student is ineligible for a period of time and I come into one of those breaks that happens during the year. Steve, give us some thoughts on that one.
Well, it would continue, and especially if it's in district play. I might pass that back to you, Robert, real quick.
All right. So historically, you finish the school year in the spring. Am I eligible beginning in the fall if maybe I failed a class? And you have been. That ineligibility did not carry over from the spring to the fall. What about during winter break? What about during spring break? What about during other breaks throughout the year? Why is this important and relevant now? Well, because we know many of our schools have scheduled breaks because of their view of what the school year is going to look like. They've scheduled breaks or they've scheduled longer breaks than they have historically. So this will come into play and we'll be getting information out to you on what you can expect and the eligibility of those students during that time. Brian, any comments?
I think the rule of thumb we've seen when we went back and looked at the survey results, some people are planning a 4-week Christmas break. In the past, would an ineligible student, someone who had failed 2 courses in the fall, have been able to play in a winter tournament? That would have been the answer, would have been yes. But with now a 4-week break, that might send you 2 or 3 games deep into your district play. So to kind of reiterate where Steve was, if you are ineligible at the end of a hard grade, which is a semester, or your 6 or 9 week, whichever your solid grading periods, then you would be ineligible for those 2 weeks. And district games over the breaks take precedent, so district would then, you'd be ineligible for those. If you get into that situation, please reach out to us. We're here at info@taps.biz. As you get to those first grading periods and concerns come up, we're kind of stretching out in the weeds saying what if, but just know that we have thought about that. This is a helpful clarification here as we move forward. So again, the deeper we get into the year, we know more questions will arise, and we hope this will help you to answer those questions ahead of time, and then we'll be able to help you as well.
Yeah, as a former basketball and baseball coach, I try to put that out of my mind when there's no pass over a break, because we always play over those breaks. But moving on to the international students, there's no changes in the governance of TAPS at this time. Also, if you've been following the news, the student visas will be good, even if they're going to virtual learning model. Make sure you get all your student applications into TAPS for our review. Make sure we've gone through everything to get everybody in good shape and eligible moving into the new year. And also stay in close contact with your SEVIS field representative for updates. We just talked to ours a couple of days ago and got an update on the changes and what was going on. And we stay in contact with them as an organization, but as an individual school, they're there to help and answer your questions. And they reiterated that on our phone call on Wednesday.
All right, thanks, Steve. We're going to jump to transfer students right quick. That's in section 104 of the bylaws. Transfer students. Go to that next one, Will. No changes in our transfer student policies. Our deadlines for each sports season, fall, winter, and spring, are on the TAPS calendar. Those will remain the same. Senior transfer deadline. If you have seniors that are looking at transferring to your school, there's a senior transfer deadline of August 15th. That will not change. None of those deadlines have been changed. We do have an appeal process. If you get to a student that comes in after one of those deadlines, we have an appeal process. There certainly are exceptions that the board reviews and often grants with regard to military transfer, employment changes, natural disasters. All those are a part of our appeal process. So if you have a student that falls in that category, reach out to us. We can help you walk through that process. Brian?
Robert, I know that it says August 15th is the senior transfer deadline, but we do have an exception to that, and I think it may come into play this year. What's that one exception that goes for senior transfers as far as the actual date?
The way that particular bylaw is worded, August 15th is the date, or if it's after August 15th that you start school, it's your first day of school. So if you start school after August the 15th, if you start before the 15th, and August 15th is the deadline, if your first day of school is after August 15th, then your first day of school becomes that deadline for senior transfers into your school.
So going back to our survey results, we had a great majority of planning to start on August 17th. So August 17th would then be that action date, correct?
That is correct.
Again, you can make an appeal on that. The board, since that is in the bylaws, there is an appeal process. Robert's going to go through that here in just a second, but just kind of wanted to make sure that we're all on the same page. The transfer deadlines, fall, winter, spring, the fall transfer deadline, September 8th, those all will still be in play. However, appeals are allowed, and our TAP staff is here to help you walk through. If you get to that position, let us know. We're going to walk through here just a little bit more on the student transfers. One of the concerns is students who withdraw and return to a member school. I feel like this year there are going to be, whether you offer virtual or in person, there's going to be folks that maybe do not feel as comfortable with that. They may leave your school for a period of 2 or 3 weeks and then realize the grass is not greener on the other side, and they want to come back to your school. At that point, they do become a transfer student. The students who do not start the school year anywhere else, they don't start a homeschool program, they don't start anywhere else, those would not be transfer students. They'll walk right back in. And I do think we'll have some of those that are going to take an extended summer for whatever option and then come back. And again, we mentioned it earlier, students moving between virtual and on-campus instruction, those students are not going to be counted as transfer students. They have been enrolled and they're moving through your curriculum just as you have planned. So those options will still exist. So transfer students, if you have questions, if you have concerns, we're also working on a course that you can, it'll be available in the Rank 1 portal, but it'll also be available on the TAPS website. So when you have parents we'll have a little information so that it comes from us and not you. Sometimes having TAPS be the bad guy to say this is what's going to happen or not makes it a little easier on you. So one quick question and clarification: if your school doesn't start till August the 20th or August the 31st or September 8th, you have no virtual on campus or other instruction until that time, then that senior transfer deadline would be extended from August 15th till that time. Robert, talk to us quickly about the appeals process.
Okay, we have appeals process for anything that's contained in the bylaws, and that is transfer students, but this doesn't apply just to transfers. It's to appeal relief from any bylaw. That process is really pretty simple. The appeal form is found in your coach's toolkit in rank 1. You can go in there, you can click on that, complete it and hit submit. That's an online submission, comes directly to our office. We look for those on a daily basis, and we see those. We start the process. You also are always free, and we would encourage you, if you think you're going to appeal something, call us ahead of time, tell us what the situation is, let us help you walk through that, help you craft that, and know which particular bylaws you're appealing and why. And then once we get all that information, we'll review it here in the office. If we think we need additional information or documentation, we'll ask for that. And then appeals go to our executive board. We'll review it here, pass it on to the board. And then once the board takes action, they are the full and final authority of our organization, and then you would be notified. What we do want is we want those to come through the school. We have parents that call frequently and ask eligibility questions, and we're certainly always glad to answer their questions and direct them to the governance that applies. But we really want the whole appeal process to come through our school, through the AD or head of school, and begin the process there. You're critical in helping us get the information from the people involved and all that documentation so that we can give it our best effort in getting that before the board and getting all the information we need. Brian?
So as we come to the end of student eligibility, again, brick and mortar or all virtual, those are both, as long as they're with your school and in your school confines, those would be eligible for extracurricular participation or a combination thereof. You might be taking 2 online and you might be taking 2 on campus. Any of that will work through. So again, not to get too deep into the weeds for any one particular situation, info@taps.biz. Let's schedule a time to get you on a phone call and walk through it.
All right, John, I think we got a poll question coming up here. Is that right?
Yes, sir. 1 second. Okay, folks, we would like to know, has your county issued orders requiring a delayed start to in-person student instruction and activities? Again, if you are not an administrator or staff associated with a TAP school, you can just leave this out. We'd like to hear from our school administrators, please. Leave this open for a little bit longer, about 15 more seconds. All right, folks, thank you for your participation. And Robert, back to you.
All right, thank you, John. Okay, let's jump into the calendar. This is what everybody's been waiting for. Go ahead, Will. Disclaimer, remember that's still there. Let's talk about important dates. Okay, September 1, that is our annual time when all of your contracts are due, your participation form, your membership fees and dues. Those are all still due on September 1. The board is making some changes this year to assist our schools from a financial perspective. We still want your contract on September 1. We still want your participation form on September 1. We need to know who's intending to play, what they've signed up for previously, and where you're aligned in your classifications in your districts. And we still want your membership fee. Historically, that's been your dues. That's $400, $500, $600, depending on what classification you're in. We will not collect and we will not ask you to send your activity fees. Those are the events you sign up for your fall and winter activities. We want to know that you're doing them, but you will be billed for those in October, okay? And for our spring activity fees, those things you sign up for in the spring, you will be billed for those in January. We are full well aware of the financial implications of what's been going on the last several months. Our board has looked at this, and decided that in an area that is very critical for you as you get the school started, we're gonna give you guys some relief and allow you the opportunity to spread those payments out. Brian?
Just as a quick clarification there, those things, all those things Robert talked about, the contract participation form, your membership fees invoice, that'll all be coming out, mailed out of our office here between August 1 and August 4. That'll be headed your way, and then that gives you almost a month to get it back to us. So just kind of to reiterate, you'll be receiving that information back quickly.
All right. We have Vina here in the office with us, and she's been quiet the whole time, but we're going to let Vina share a few thoughts on fine arts activities because they're jumping into business in the fall just like everyone else.
Thanks, Robert. I have gotten emails saying, are we coming back? And the answer is yes, we are coming back. As we've already discussed this morning about eligibility, these rules do apply to fine arts students. So we have a fine arts webinar scheduled for next Tuesday, July 21st. We have session A at 10 o'clock, and we're continuing for a second session at 2 o'clock that afternoon. I want to invite all head directors, not just the fine arts directors, to join us in that webinar. So our fine arts activities that we have this fall are fall band, marching band and drumline, one-act play, and cheer. We'll go into a little bit deeper in that webinar as far as what things we're working towards, but we do want you to know that we're working for in-person competition as well as virtual options so that everyone can participate.
Also, this is a reminder that we need everyone working together with the athletic department and the fine arts, the time, the resources, the protocols, all these challenges. So every year it's important, but this year extra important. So make sure the fine art director and the athletic director and the head of school are together, and everyone's speaking to each other and communicating the plan.
I think it's important as you think about the fine arts and the athletic, the fine arts are generally more co-curricular occurring during the school day. I know that that may change as you go virtual or as we move between virtual and in-person. Know that we are definitely looking on virtual opportunities. We had those started last spring, especially on the academic and the music side. Vina's worked very hard for those one-act play folks to be able to find some publishers that have Zoom presentations. They have all kinds of presentations that our publishers are working on as well. So work it together. Kids have so many gifts, and so do our great coaches and sponsors. So again, July 21, reach out to your fine art director and to your directors, program directors. It would be great for them to join us there. We're going to jump ahead to important dates. August 3rd was going to be the date that we were going to start practice in the fall. That was the official start of the TAP school participation year. August 17th was the scrimmage week for football, and then August 31, we were already rocking and rolling and moving forward. So those dates have changed. So August 3rd, I will tell you that you will get an update on what we are going to be doing in the fall to the best of our knowledge. You can also circle August 17 and August 31. Those are going to be update opportunities for us to inform our schools and our members, depending on what COVID-19 and other situations present. We will have updates moving forward on August 3rd, August 17, and August 31. Obviously, if something happens in between those dates, we will reach out as soon as possible. But as we move forward presently, circle your calendar 3, 17, and 31 of August so that we can update you on our current and future plans.
All right, important changes. We've had this question throughout the summer. For this year, for 2020-2021, dead week has been suspended. So summer rules still apply. There is no dead week this year. If you want to do what you're allowed to do under our summer rules and in your particular locale, you can do that during dead week. We will have dead week again next year in 2021. August 3rd through September 7th. We will have some changes. And we're going to talk about it in these time frames. We're going to talk about this time frame of August 3rd through September 7th. We're going to give you some practice limitations that will be in place. And I'm going to pass it off to Steve to walk through those with you.
And I'm going to repeat, August 3rd through September 7th, no interscholastic competition, scrimmages, contests, games, meets, tournaments is allowed. We're moving our summer rules to extend all the way to September 7th, and this will be in effect, the summer rules, until your school's first day of school. Okay. From now until that time, we're in summer rules. The first day of school can be defined either by instruction, brick and mortar, or virtual. And moving on to fall sports, Brian.
So we're going to change our terminology just a hair, and the next few slides we're going to talk about our fall sports. So fall soccer, field hockey, football, volleyball are our team activities. Cross country, golf, swim, tennis, track and field, and wrestling. Wrestling is starred there. If you have a wrestling program, understand that that is the most contact I think you can have in any activity. You're going to have to use some great local discretion on when to begin anything other than strength and conditioning. We get that as well. As the National Federation provides us guidelines on wrestling, we'll kick those out to you as well. So fall soccer, field hockey, football, and volleyball, those are the team sports, and we're going to move forward as we come off of that. Once school begins, in person or virtual, through September 7th. So if you begin on August the 10th, so it would be August 10th through September 7th, these rules, workout guidelines will come into play. So once you begin school through September 7th, all contact hours count towards a maximum of 3 hours per day and 15 hours per week. So those activities, whether they're in your school day or after or before, would include strength and conditioning, sports specific, or directed film study, anything like that. And that includes both the in-person and virtual. And if your coaches are giving virtual instruction or you're having team meetings, same thing would apply for one-act play if you're doing some kind of deal there or choir. So from the day your school starts, in-person or virtual, in August or whatever your date is, through September 7th, you have a maximum 3 hours per day contact hours for extracurricular activities with each student and a maximum of 15 hours per week.
Now, off-season sports during this time period, August 3rd, September 7th. That's going to be basketball, winter soccer, baseball, softball. When school begins, you're now just like regular school. You get 1 hour per day maximum of instruction. You can also have, this can be in person or it can be virtual. Again, somewhat feeling of normality. Open facilities is okay in terms of, is allowed by TAPS regulations, but we do want to caution you to be aware of the local discretion and the protocols that you have in place if you're going to have an open facility or open weight room situation.
All right, thank you, Steve. Just as a reminder, we're in summer rules. Those will continue through dead week. We have no dead week this year, and those will continue until your first day of school. When your first day of school starts between then and September 7th, if you're in a fall sport, you have those guidelines in place. If you're in an off-season sport, once you start school, you have those guidelines in place. Next, we have a little chart here. This is a chart we've created here in the office, and we've had a lot of questions about what I can do or what's my participation based on my education model. If you're in person, obviously, you're allowed to practice and hold open gyms. If you're virtual only, because you've chosen to do that for reasons that are not illness related, you're not closing down your school, you could practice, you could have open gyms. If you're virtual only, as many of us found out over the last couple of days, because there's been some local mandate or ordinance saying you cannot do that, then no, you cannot. You have to follow those. If you're virtual only and it's illness related, if you've decided I'm shutting down my school and going virtual only for safety reasons and illness reasons, you should not practice, you should not have open gyms. If you're on the combination of in-person and planned virtual, certainly you could still practice and still hold open gyms. The schedule breaks and holidays, that's local control for you at the school level. You may have changed your school schedule and scheduled some of those breaks throughout there. Brian?
Again, as we go back through those fall sports, remember that the team sports, fall soccer, field hockey, football, and volleyball, have a beginning and ending date. That's why they're important. When we indicated that cross country, track, tennis, swim, golf, and wrestling were on there, those individual sports are considered in season for the whole year. So nothing's changing, nothing's moving. It's simply if you want to go to a fall track meet, if you want to go to an indoor track meet, if you want to start swim meets early, whatever they have, those are there. So individual sports do not have a beginning and end date. They simply move forward. So once you get started and move through, understand that the calendar is still going to stay the same. We are not flipping seasons. I know that's like 20 questions that we received really quickly. I apologize if I confused. but that's where we're moving forward. So all the individual sports can practice. They'll be considered to have extra time. They will not be in off season. Only the team sports of winter soccer, basketball, baseball, and softball will be considered to be off season once your school begins curriculum in the fall.
All right, let's move on to some important dates in September. So we've carried you from August 3rd through September 7th, beginning on September 8th and those weeks following. We've got an update for you. Go to the next one, Will. September 8th, remember, is our fall transfer deadline. September the 8th will be the beginning of school-based activities. At that point, you can move into your in-season. If you're in a fall sport, you can move into your in-season regulations as we'll outline in the next few slides. Off-season rules will be in effect. And this week, for all activities, although you'll be moving into your activities, will be strength and conditioning only. Steve, talk about the individual sports.
Yeah, the individual sports kind of caused a stir there. The individual sports do not have the same limitations as team year round, but September 8th, they'll begin strength and conditioning. September 14th, practices, and you can begin scrimmages. And on the 21st, interscholastic competition with tournaments, meets, etc.
So again, the original dates on the calendar of August 3rd, August 10th, etc., those are now update dates when we will tell you any update that we have. So those dates will no longer be the start of practice, the start of scrimmages, or the start of games. As we've indicated here, the beginning of the TAPS practice and strength and conditioning, etc., will begin. So August 3rd becomes September 8th. And for other teams, September 14, 21, etc., will apply. So change your calendar mindset. August 3rd and 10th, those dates are simply summer workout still occur, that's still voluntary, etc. September 8th becomes the new August 3rd, and we'll move forward from there.
All right, we're going to take you through each of those fall team sports and give you the specifics of what you can do starting on September 8th with each week. Steve, take volleyball for us.
Okay, volleyball, your first week of practice will be strength and conditioning. Starting on September 14th, you go into the gym and start using the ball. And by the end of that week, you should be in scrimmages. September 21st, we are going all out with our schedule, our matches with volleyball. Moving on to fall soccer, field hockey, strength and conditioning, regular practice September 14th. We go on to practice and scrimmage on the 21st, and then September 28th, we will begin our games and our matches for field hockey and fall soccer. And that brings us to football. And football has a few more moving pieces, and we're going to hand that over to Robert to go through.
All right, thank you, Steve. In football, on September 8th, that week of September 8th, strength and conditioning only. Like Brian said, this would be your normal first week of football. August 3rd has now been pushed forward to September 8th. First week, September 8th, strength and conditioning only. The week of September 15th, full pads are allowed for all athletes that participated in the previous week. It'd be strength and conditioning only for those students who did not participate in the previous week. Next slide, the week of September 21, full pads allowed. You'll be allowed a scrimmage that week, only one scrimmage allowed this year. And then of course you would have strength and conditioning only for any of those students who had not been there and still need to go through that acclimation period. Next slide, September 28. This will be your first week for interscholastic games. Strength and conditioning only once again for any who may be coming late and have not been acclimated. We're going to kind of take a pause here and pick up some questions. Brian?
So basically, the gist of this is the TAP season is being truncated. So we are moving from August the 3rd to September the 8th. Any contest, games, scrimmages, tournaments, etc., scheduled prior to September 8th, those will not be able to be taking place this year. So your schedule of games will begin like we said before. Will, if you'll jump back up to volleyball for me real quick. So in volleyball, you will have your practice scrimmage opportunities the week of September 14th. So you'll do strength and conditioning with some practice, then practice and scrimmages. Your actual games will begin on September 21. So any contest in volleyball that you had scheduled prior to September 21 is now gone. You'll have to wipe those off your schedule and we'll start again. Drop down for me, Will, to football. So basically football, even though you're starting on the 8th and then the 15th, so the 15th is the first day you'll be able to get into pads. So somewhere around earlier this year, it was August the 6th would have been your first day in pads. Now your first day in pads will be September 15th. So the first time you put pads on them, September 15th. The first week that you can have games will be the week of September the 28th. So each season will have a truncated season. You're going to lose the first weeks that we normally would have had, but we're looking forward to being able to offer from September the 21st for volleyball and individual sports, and September 28th for football and fall soccer through their conclusion. At the present time, we are not moving the championships back. We're holding them where they are. One of the big reasons for that is we don't know where this situation that we're in right now with COVID-19 is going to go. So obviously, if the situation settles down and hospitalization rates and the metrics and the governor allows us to open back up quicker, then we would look at that opportunity. However, on the flip side to that, if it continues where it is, we may have to move back forward farther, and that would allow us within our scheduling guidelines to have a little leeway. So we are moving forward with September 8th as your first day of practice, and then the first games that as we are moving forward, we are going to go ahead. So football, you're allowed one scrimmage. Fall soccer and volleyball, you'd still be allowed your scrimmages as you desire.
All right, thanks, Brian. We've got a lot of questions here about fine arts. Do these rules apply to the fine art activities?
Fine art, again, there's no competitions in fine arts during that time period for the most part. So you would still be under the same restrictions of your 3 hours per day, 15 hours of contact, just like athletics up until September the 8th when things would open back up. So we'll go back, but again, so as we are moving and truncating the fall seasons, we're now moving forward to the winter sports. So on the original calendar and what's posted right now, October 19th was the first day of practice. You can see October 26th was the first day of scrimmages, and November 2nd, the first day of games. November 3rd continues to be the winter transfer deadline. There'll be no change there. However, October 19th now becomes November the 2nd. November the 2nd will be your first day of practice for the team sports of winter soccer and basketball. November the 9th will be your first day of scrimmages for basketball and winter soccer. And then that Thursday, November 12th, will be the first day of games for basketball and winter soccer.
All right, we've got several questions here we're going to try to grab, asking, will these fall seasons be extended later?
I think I covered that quickly. That probably came before we said it. Right now, our state championship dates and our champion district certification dates are as they are on the calendar. We are reserving that opportunity without moving back farther in the event we need it if COVID gets worse or stays the same.
All right, well, let's move ahead back to competition as we look to beginning September 8th, moving into more normalcy of our year that we're used to. We'll have information coming out as we get closer to that will help you. One of those important things is schedule. Brian, why don't you address that for us?
So obviously, if we're moving the start date from August 3rd to September 8th in football, you're all the way back to September 28th in that week. Basically, our recommendation is that you will truncate the first part of your schedule. You will have to reschedule the week before, the week of September 21 into a scrimmage situation. So unfortunately, we are losing those contests and those tournaments. If you have district games scheduled in volleyball or fall soccer prior to that September 21st date, you would need to reschedule. Football, we know we have a couple of districts that have more than 7 playing dates on that, or have 7 playing dates. You're only going to have 6 this year. So you will not be allowed that extra football game. It's simply you're going to go into your district. You will develop your tiebreakers based on a 6-game schedule. We will use wild card points to the best of our ability in all opportunities as we seed into the brackets. The brackets will be coming out September 15th. The question also came up to when can you be in pads in football. So basically you're in strength and conditioning and in summer rules, which means you can use the ball, and there is approved gear that you can use, soft shell helmets, ground pads, and handheld pads, etc. That's on the website. So your summer rules will continue in football. You'll not be able to go to hard shell helmets and pads until that September 14th date. The other question that kind of comes across on the schedule side is a reminder, we do not have, other than football, which has the 5-day limitation in between games, TAPS does not limit your number of games per week like other organizations do. So at that time, if you had to play, if you desired and your district desired to play 3 district games a week, you could do that, or 2, or a double up on a weekend, etc. Your districts are going to have to be a little creative as those conditions move back in and take away some playing dates. So again, we know it is not perfect. We know that it's not giving you 24 games and 3 tournaments in volleyball. It's not 10 games over 11 weeks in football. Having had to cancel the entire spring, we feel like as a board and staff, giving this option and giving an opportunity to play in the fall, giving that opportunity even with a slight restriction to winter, we feel like we're moving forward with an opportunity to present championship contest. Scheduling, obviously your districts are going to have to get back together, go over the opportunities that are allowed. And we're here by phone or by email to assist you as your district gets back into the planning mode. It's not going to be real fruitful if we take every question. The questions that are coming in are very district specific or sport specific. We'll encourage you as a district to call or have a district representative call, and we'll help walk you through that. So schedules, yes, they're going to have to change. We understand that. And then one of the scheduling opportunities that we have allowed and will continue to allow in limited situation are your out-of-state contests. Steve, talk to that just a little bit.
And also, while you change all these games and make your schedules different, make sure you update ScoreStream and Rank 1. So I'll give them a little commercial. So again, we get off the road there a little bit, but make sure we're taking care of all of that. Out-of-state opportunities will still be there, especially you people who are border states and going on, but make sure you double check those. And if we've already approved something, please resubmit. We're going to be looking at everything, making sure that we're lined up well with the other associations. We're not disallowing out of state, but we need to make sure the application is in. They'll be looked at very closely, and we'll try to work in a cooperative manner with the associations surrounding us. Also, people have asked us about tournaments. That's a school and local decision whether you want to be part of a tournament in volleyball or basketball or whatever for the coming year. As of right now, there is no TAPS governance that forbids tournaments except for game limits and things like that. So again, tournaments are up to you. When we go into a facility, you are responsible for the protocols that'll be applied to your athletic facilities. Also, when we host the host facilities that we're having for the championships, the protocols will be set by the host site. And so be aware of that as we move through the year, and also be aware of that as you are a host. Make sure it's very clearly spelled out and communicated to your guests that come on site. Also be aware when you come to our championships that we will have protocols in place for those facilities, and those are going to be reflective of the host site.
All right, thank you, Steve. We've had a lot of questions about fans over the course of the summer. People looking forward to, am I going to allow fans on my campus? What are my options if I'm the home team or the visiting team? Here's some thoughts we have. We'll get back to you with more guidance on this as we get closer to competitions. Home crowd. Some thoughts. Are you allowing any fans at all? What is your capacity going to be? Do you have restrictions that you're imposing, or maybe that are imposed by your local orders? And then what size crowd are you going to allow? If I'm the visitor, if the home crowd fans are allowed, then our visitors going to be allowed. We believe that should be the case. Once again, capacity with no restrictions. Are there local restrictions? Is there going to be a crowd size? We've had some people reach out to our office and say, well, we're going to allow home fans, but not visitors fans. So we're going to use all those for our fans. That's not a good direction to go. That's not a good direction to move. We have a lot of our schools that may be transitioning from putting a bunch of students on a bus to parents transporting students to their school. It's not a good it's not in line with competition with honor. If those people travel to an away game, they see your fans walking in, packing the gym, and then they're not allowed to come in. Once again, we'll be getting back to you with more guidance on that, but just know that we've heard a lot of information about that, and we will be giving you some information in that direction. Calendar, Will, if you'll jump to that next. This is a picture of our homepage. As you see at the top right there, that second one is calendar. You can click on that. That'll take you to our calendar. Throughout the rest of today, we will be updating that calendar with all the changes that we've shared with you here. So you can always go there to find that information. Another thing that we need to make sure that you have done well and correctly and updated is rank 1. Steve, visit with us about rank 1.
Yes, and we really have to ask and request that you double check, make sure that your head administrators, your coaches, program directors are all correctly entered in rank 1. This is not only for the eligibility process of all staff members, but also for our communications. And obviously, communication is key right now as things are changing. The Twilight Zone episode 2020 is going on, so anything's possible. You must stay informed. You need to stay connected and make sure you're there with the proper information in rank 1. Also, make sure all your students are entered and we get the student profile filled out by the family. This will also help you because it will let you know if they need a transfer form, international student not living with parent. So again, that's there to help athletic directors and fine arts directors get the eligibility and not miss anything. So make sure you filled out everything and your people are filled out properly with the student profile in rank 1, and that'll help things to keep rolling. Brian.
Kind of as an aside to that, remember we have 41,000 students in TAPS and we have 6,000 coaches, program directors, and sponsors. We need to make sure all those folks are in there appropriately. Each of your students will have to redo their student questionnaire as each of your coaches. As a reminder, last year and this year, the SCOPE program is actually in the coaches' professional acknowledgement of rules. It'll kick you over and kick you back. So that being said, I think that option is still there. That helps us to communicate. I would definitely ask you to make sure that when rank 1, that your head administrator, whether it be your principal or superintendent, whatever the title is, make sure they're in there as well so we can communicate directly to the administration as it comes across. We've put a lot of information out there. We've tried to give you a base of what our thoughts are. We know these are tough decisions, so I want to go and just kind of reanalyze and look here. School is a curricular basis, a co-curricular basis, and an extracurricular basis. Your curriculum is going to be virtual or brick and mortar this year, or some variance thereof. The challenges that our teachers and our principals and our administrators face are tremendous, just like it is for our program directors and our coaches. Many of you teach in the classroom as well. The co-curricular activities, the art where you're providing and you're producing your material in class, whether it's a speech class, whether it's a music period or whatever, man, I cannot think how hard that is for those teachers to go virtual and to do the things that they're looking to do. But I credit them because as we look at school websites, et cetera, it's extremely encouraging to us what your teachers and what your programs have done. Extracurriculars, those things that occur outside the school day, that big black line around the outside is time. There's only so much time in the day and so many contact hours you're going to have before the students, the coaches, and everybody become overwhelmed. So I just encourage you to get together, work together, know that we're trying to do the same to help you. That's what some of the guidelines are here, is to allow schools to get back. The reason we're saying 3 hours a day and 15 max is to, we hope you don't hit those maxes at the very first week of school. That's why we're allowing us to move all the way back to September 8th before we really start getting prepped for competition. The rest of that is strength and conditioning. So we're all in this together. It's one big box and we're there. Robert, hit us with the disclaimer and then we'll take whatever questions we can as we finish out this webinar.
Okay, Brian, thank you very much. Just as a reminder, like we've said at the beginning and throughout all our webinars, we've tried to give you some parameters on goals and restrictions that are in place from a TAPS perspective, what you can and cannot do with regard to your practices and your competitions as we move through between now and August 3rd, from August 3rd to September 7th, and then September 8th forward. So keep that in mind. You do have your local, state, and national restrictions in place. Steve?
We're coming back. We continue our planning for our championship opportunities for our member schools and students. Calendars are being put together. We're getting our sites. We're looking at all sorts of plans and backup plans and everything else. And so it's time, guys. It's time to get moving in that direction. And right now, we got a lot of questions, and I'll start with Brian.
You know, every time I sit and I think about it, the changes that are occurring the world over right now are changing things to our lives as well. As human nature, we want to hold on to what we know, and maybe you know, sometimes too large. So I want to go over and just reiterate a couple of things that come to my mind as we've gone through here, and it's probably on the questions as well. So remember that in our team sports, you have a JV varsity option. So in volleyball and fall soccer, you can if someone is playing both JV and varsity, they have an additional 6 games. So if you have that back end of one roster and the top end of another, make sure that you read those options and get back with us. In football, we do have the 6-quarter rule. Young man or young woman who's participating in football would be allowed to participate in up to 6 quarters. That rule has not changed and will not change for the coming year. Another opportunity out there from a scheduling perspective is remember to go to section Robert, I'm from 133 schedules or 138 schedules.
138 schedules.
So 138 schedules tells you who is and who is not an eligible opponent. Those situations have not been relaxed at all either. Any conference or any league that is not listed on that page is not listed for a reason. So we list those that you have approval to play with homeschool groups, and make sure that they are confining their student body to high school students. You don't want to be playing 19 and 20-year-olds with your students. A few years ago, we had a few people want to play JUCO, go play a junior college team because they had a JV, and the answer is no, you cannot go do that as well. Robert, what other questions are you kicking up as we see it? Go ahead.
We have a lot of questions regarding, are we mirroring what the UIL is doing? What's their calendar look like? What have they said as we sit here at 11:13 on Friday morning?
It's hard to know what another organization is doing when they have their legislative council. They have a great staff working on their plans. They've made presentations through Texas high school athletic directors, and I'm sure they will continue to do so and make their own announcements. TAPS is moving forward with this plan. This is the plan that we feel best provides our schools an opportunity to have both fall and winter activities. So I don't know that answers it entirely, but we're moving ahead with TAPS rather than waiting to see what others do, because we feel like this will give you a firm date and a firm set of dates to take back to your school administration, to your coaches, to your fans, and let them know we are coming back and when we're going to come back.
We've got a lot of questions. We won't be able to get to all of them. A lot of them are very similar with regard to some clarification on what we've said with what can be done in these particular time periods. We will have information out this afternoon that will have that in writing for you to review and look, and you can always reach out if you have any questions.
Also want to hit back to the idea, one of the questions that we asked early on was, has your county mandated online versus whatever curriculum? As a reminder, if you're virtual, you're still not going to be able to come back until September 8th, but if you are mandated to be virtual, you can still move forward as long as you are within those guidelines. So if you are in virtual school between now and September 8th, then your protocols would be the same in the spring. Whether or not you come to practice at your school would be up to you. I do believe that most of the mandates that are out there are indicating public and private schools, and that's also I know we have several schools and other organizations that are looking to see how that authority applies. As of right now, to our knowledge, it does, and they also specified extracurricular activities. So if you're currently under a mandate, read that mandate very carefully. And I do believe that the ones that I have seen and I have read personally, letter by letter, indicate that public and private schools are included and extracurricular activities are not allowed as long as you're in-person. Extracurricular activities would not be allowed as long as you're in a virtual setting.
Question here about junior high. TAPS regulates high school competition. So junior high, that's up to you at your school, local control, and then obviously in compliance with whatever local orders might be in place.
The question that comes up as well, especially for volleyball and fall soccer, the game limits we have not reduced. However, I think local control, I think you need to be very aware that your students have not been in school since March. And I would be highly encouraging to you and to your administrators that trying to hit 24 games in 3 tournaments might be a little tough in a 6-week period, but that would also be eligible for local control.
Got a question about summer. If they have students involved in non-school sponsored summer activities, can they continue to do those?
Yeah, it's same rules, 136. We stay firm with that, and we roll right through. We just pulled summer all the way up. As long as you're following the same rules and being aware of the same, pitfalls that can come as well. Non-school means non-school.
I know that there's concern about when we're doing things. If you look at the calendar, TAP sponsors 30 championship events. Some of those will be possible, some of those, and most of them are quite probable right now. We're not looking at canceling anything. Moving dates around, the dates are on the calendar, so both your spring, winter, and our fall championships are all listed. Again, moving those dates is probably not going to happen. I would indicate that right now the board has approved the calendar as we have presented it today. We've amended the start dates, but all of the championships remain in place to allow us the most flexibility possible. And I think that is the best answer I could give to that question as we look forward.
We have a question about if a county mandates online only and a school loses those games, are those games going to be counted as forfeits?
At this time, we're not going to count anything as a forfeit. Forfeit for us has to do with whether or not you are going to the playoffs. That's really the only true rule that we have in the TAPS bylaws. So if you lose those games, they will not count against you. They will not count as a victory. And then what we have not mentioned, I don't want to go too far in the weeds here, but there is a great possibility from the information that we've read that we could have COVID come visit your school or another school somewhere down the road, and you have to shut down for a week or two, or someone may have a situation other than COVID that requires them to shut down a week or two. The bottom line is, if it's emergency related, illness related, and you lose the game or can't participate, that's not a forfeit. It just goes as an open. And if you were able to reschedule for that game, you could reschedule a game in that place.
And we've done that before for hurricanes and floods and icing before. So we've had these catastrophic events where we've been able to address it and work through it. So it's not something we're not used to, it's just something we don't look forward to doing.
Again, when you look at the TAPS calendar, everything we have on the TAPS calendar, including team tennis and lacrosse, as we discussed earlier, and a few things, we are planning on trying to offer those opportunities. COVID-19 and the availability of facilities. We have reached out to our host facilities, and most at this time have given us a firm maybe and a hand bump or a fist bump instead of a handshake that will be allowed on their campuses. I do have to say to them that if they bring us on, we greatly appreciate that, because it would be hard for me to open my doors. When you go back to the numbers that we had up there, are you going to allow strangers on your visitors to your campus? 50% of our schools said no. And then even for their own extracurriculars, our schools were saying 25% said no. So we're moving forward. Our fees are as they are posted. The board voted to maintain the event fee at $300 as we move forward. For all activities, that will not change. Our fees for both fine arts and athletics can be found on the athletics and on the fine arts webpage. Robert, what else do we have before we wrap this up?
Got a few questions about spring dates. We'll be getting back to you on that. Obviously, we know that's very important. You're looking toward that. We've got to navigate the fall, get into the winter, and then as we move into that, we'll get back to you with more definitive answers on if any of those dates are moving.
In conclusion, we appreciate everybody that's joined us here today. We definitely appreciate this being a membership-driven organization. Tough decisions have to be made. Again, I give great credit to our executive board and the staff here for looking at the options. We have been reviewing options since March. Nothing has changed. At the present time, the information we've presented, going back to Robert's disclaimer, is the best we have at the present time. If the situation changes, obviously, if things got remarkably better tomorrow, we could look at doing a reduction in our how far back we go. I don't see that on the metrics that everybody's presented. Again, we have our office at Texas Motor Speedway, and they're preparing for a race with 20,000 or 50,000 fans in the stands because executive orders of the state of Texas allow that. The question and concern that continues to come up, why are Club, Select, and AAU allowed to play and we can't? Again, executive orders of the state of Texas do not preclude them. However, as local and state direction continues, we are precluded. Robert's got one last question, and then we're going to finish it off for today.
Well, I don't have a question, but I do want to share with you that we received hundreds of questions. Obviously, we couldn't get to all of them. We tried to hit the highlights or the ones that were frequently asked. We know you'll have additional questions. Like Brian said, reach out to us, info@taps.biz. We will try to help you walk through those, answer those specifics. A lot of them are specific to your district and getting your games done and rescheduled. We understand that. We'll help you walk through that. But we want you to know that from our perspective, we do understand the importance of every one of these, but to value the time of everybody on the webinar, we'll ask you to reach out to us with those questions at our office.
So again, the calendar is up to date as far as spring and winter championships. The beginning dates for the winter activities and all the fall will be updated by close of business today. So greatly encourage you to go to our calendar, www.taps.biz, click on the word calendar and scroll across. If you have a question or concern, info@taps.biz, 254-947-9268. That information is still up on the website. Contact us there. We're here to help as you walk through. Understand as well with 228 member schools all receiving this information right now. The phone might get a little busy and the emails might take a little bit of time. But again, understand that we are continuing to look at all opportunities, options. Going back to what we said, we're going to embrace our challenges and we're going to recognize our opportunities. So as opportunities present themselves, we're going to continue to move forward. We appreciate everyone who has been a part of the process moving in March. We appreciate all of you that have called and emailed, and we ask you to continue to do so. As situations change in your city or in your area, please reach out to us. We don't necessarily read every newspaper across this great state, but we try. So again, thank you for joining us. Thank you for being a member of TAPS, and to the families and to the parents, again, thank you for being part of the TAPS extended family. John, closing remarks.
Thank you, Brian. Thanks everybody in the TAPS office for all your help today. Folks, one more reminder, you're going to receive, if you were registered for the webinar today, even if you weren't able to be here, if you registered, you're going to receive an email in a couple of hours with a direct link to the recording of this presentation. It's also going to be posted with links on our website and on our YouTube page. I apologize to everybody who was listening on TAPS Radio. It made us sound a little weird. I'm not sure why I did that, and I apologize. But folks, questions, info@taps.biz, call us at the office. We're going to get back to each of your questions as fast as we can. Thank you for being with us this morning, and please enjoy the rest of your day.